welcome to Castle Talk, where we talk to writers and creators of today's genre worlds. I'm your host, Jason Henderson, publisher at Castle Bridge Media, where this month we bring you the grisly female Shawshank Redemption with vampires novella Bloodsucker City by Jim Towns. Today, we're chatting with Cory Choy, director of the new film ESME My Love, a psychological thriller starring Stacey Weckstein as Hannah and Audrey Grace Marshall as Esme, the titular Esme. So the story features Hannah, the mother, taking Esme into the woods on a trip that the mother is not revealing a great deal about because she seems to have a secret that she's not sharing yet. And I have seen the first 15 minutes of this film, but the film actually is going to have its first showing right around Thanksgiving weekend. And so we're getting ahead of it. Welcome, Cory.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Okay, but you're quite welcome. So this is really interesting. The tone of the first 15 minutes of the film is very kind of not like it's a dream, but it's dreamy. It's this mother who clearly has a lot on her mind that she's not saying, and the daughter who is being like a young daughter and willing basically to do what her mom says, but maybe complain about a little bit. You have called this film something like a psychological thriller that you said was kind of like Tree of Life and kind of like The Babadook. What did you mean by that?
So I guess this is a film. You know, when you first make a movie, people immediately ask you, okay, what were your inspirations? What are some films that this is like? And when you're trying to crew up and when you're trying to bring other people on board, they want an idea of what you're trying to make. And so I have three movies that I drew a lot of inspiration from. I actually happen to hate Tree of Life, the movie, but I found it really beautiful and it stuck in my mind.
Yeah.
And so visually, I was very influenced by Tree of Life. And then in terms of the story that I wanted to tell, there's two very disparate films that I took a lot of inspiration from in terms of form. One is The Babadook, which
Hmm.
is just an amazing film. And the other is called Old Joy, um, which I also think is a fantastic film. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but Joy is an early Kelly Reichardt film that stars Bonnie Prince Billy actually, and as one of
No,
them.
I don't know it. No.
And it's the story of two friends who are hiking in the woods and they're going to some hot springs. And really, it's a feature film, and they just kind of make their way up to the hot springs and then they go home. But it's filled with so much tension because what the story is about is that our relationship isn't what it once was. And you just keep on waiting for something really, really violent or awful to happen. And you realize it kind of has, right? But
Mhm.
it's not something literal. So it was very, very slow moving movie. And the Babadook is different. It's a horror thriller
Right.
that you just kind of goes at you. Um, and so the my film, it's a really a two-act film, which I think is not super common these days. Usually people ask, what are your three acts? I
Yeah.
really made this in two acts, and one is Hannah's act, and one is Esme's act.
Ah. Esme, My Love. One thing I think is really interesting, you know, in the beginning, is how much you're paying attention to textures, and if you think of like the way that little kids play, you get out your army men or you get out whatever, and you get real low down on the ground, and you put the army men among the leaves of grass, right? And that's what you're doing with your camera. How you'll keep the camera sort of right next to a tree limb or down next to a fallen log as Esme is looking at a caterpillar. And one thing I think that does, and I wondered if as a director you think about this, focusing that tightly on the textures around the actors causes the audience to kind of slow down with the audience, with the characters. Uh,
Absolutely.
is that
This is a
deliberate?
sl- yes, this is a slow burn film, and the space that we are in is a character in itself. So it's a two-person movie, but the third person is the space that they're in, and it's imbued with a lot of importance. This actually is a really fun film in a lot of ways, but one of the ways that it's very exciting for me is that there is a lot of actual family lore
Mm.
split between three different families. So there are actually lots of the movie, and the movie itself is based loosely on true events. So not all of it, of course, but a
Yeah.
good amount of it is actual family lore from a family that lived in these woods, and we shot on their family like grounds. So it's kind of like the space itself is its own character as well. And I think you're right. We kind of tried to make it feel that way with textures and with the fourth character, which is the music, which is very important in this
Right,
film.
and it's very it uh and the music's really interesting. So how did you and I was noticing as I was listening with headphones how well the music and the sound is mixed, just basic stereo stuff with your car going from left to right, and um how do when you're out there filming, how do you know how you're going to choose? Is this original music or is this
This is original
stuff that you've
music.
licensed? Oh, okay. Well, very
And
cool.
and so music is really important. I don't know if you know, but I come from a sound background. So my quote unquote day job is I own Silver Sound in New York City. I'm an Emmy award winning sound mixer. But this
Ah,
is my directorial live action directorial feature debut. But my job and the way I think really influenced my process here. Plus the fact that I was working with a very young actress at the time. Audrey was only 9 years old,
mm,
and I had relatively limited access to her. And because of her process, we didn't want to do. It was very clear, one, that we could not have the time to, and also her process was such that she really didn't want to do very much rehearsal at all.
mm,
So one of the things that I did prior to filming actually was, because I couldn't set up typical rehearsals, which I would normally do. I would normally get into a space and rehearse with my actors quite intensely. The
mhm.
way we did rehearsals is we actually recorded all of the lines in the booth. And that was the only rehearsal time I actually got
Really?
before filming. Yes.
But you
So
did
what
an
I
audio rehearsal. That's interesting. That
We
that
did a
is
full audio rehearsal in the sound booth, and that allowed me to work with the actresses. That was the only time I was able to get them together prior to filming.
wow. And it's a two per so it's in a way it's like a Broadway show, like what's the one Out of the Woods that with Sam Waterston where it's just two people through the whole thing and and you're just following them through the show. Did you film this during COVID or when did you do it?
No, we filmed prior to COVID. So we started writing about 6 years ago. After 3 years of writing and casting, we started filming, and we filmed in 2018 actually, and it was a very intense filming process. There were
Why is that?
well, this is an independent film, so I the only way you can make a truly independent film, and when I mean independent film, our shooting budget
Yeah.
was $90,000.
Okay.
And so sometimes people talk about independent films, they're like, "Oh no, we only had $2 million."
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
no, this is a truly independent film. And so in terms of cash budget, we only had $90,000 to complete the filming.
Mm.
And I had to really plan things out and get a lot of in-kind things. It was just like a very delicate jigsaw puzzle. So sorry, I lost my train of thought. What was the original question?
Well, I was now I'm so distracted by the question of what it is to create an independent film. You have under $100,000 to play with. Hopefully you're going to create a work that in the end goes out, to I guess festivals or what have you. It's I'm just curious about all of that, like what your goals are as a director when you're making an independent, and why you would want to even take on something so difficult.
A lot of people ask why. It's because I really had something to say, and I wanted to make this and thought it was very beautiful, and something that's kind of um, followed this movie around is everybody who has been involved with it, for better or worse, has fallen in love with the story and the
Mm,
project itself, and that can be incredibly challenging when you're bringing on people who are putting themselves into the project, because normally with a film is pretty hierarchical, right? So if you're the director or the producer, you say, this, I'd like you to do this, and then people will do their best to try to make your vision come true. In this, every step of the way, no matter
yeah.
what. And we were talking about like, uh people would fall in love and they'd be like, oh no, I can't do that because I'm going to be doing a disservice to the project. Or
Hmm.
I'd be like, what? So one of the reasons writing, so we talked about like when we shot, and when we finished. So every step of the way, I would find myself at loggerheads in just very odd places that I would not expect creatively, partially because people loved it so much and partially because they were, putting themselves I paid everybody, but it was a very, very low budget. So they were putting some part of themselves into the project as well. And they cared so much that sometimes we'd really come to loggerheads in weird
Mm.
places. So while I didn't shoot during the pandemic, I finished editing in the pandemic because it was a very long editing process. And one of the funny things that would happen is I'd work with an editor, and
Hmm.
then we'd come to a kind of a creative difference, and they would just say, no, we have to stop here and we need to figure this out, and we cannot. And I'd be like, well, what if we do this? And they'd be like, and they'd get really adamant about it. And I eventually unlocked the process for me. I brought two editors that I really liked and went onto the project. And that's what finally unlocked it for me. After several years of looking for the right editor, I realized I really needed two right editors. And when I would hit a wall with one, I'd say, okay, let's put a pin on this. And I would go and work on that spot with the other editor with fresh eyes. They had fresh eyes and were able to try what I wanted to try as a director. And then I'd
Yeah.
come back to the editor and say, oh, hey, here's what I did. And they'd be like, oh, once they actually saw it, once I actually got a chance to do it with somebody, then they could see it from my perspective. But they felt so strongly about, no, we can't go in that direction because I think it needs to go in this direction. It was just very interesting and unique. I've never run into that on any other project before as a director, where
Because
people really just fell in love and had such strong opinions.
that's really wonderful. Can you give us a little bit of a hint as to so in your synopsis, it says that the mother notices symptoms of a terminal and painful illness, and she takes her daughter on a trip to their abandoned farm in a desperate attempt to connect before they have to say goodbye. Is that a sleight of hand, or does she really? In other words, I guess what I'm asking is the mother delusional, or is there really an illness here, or do you even want
Well,
to give that much away?
and that's a really good question, and that's the question I want people to ask, because if you look at that description and then you watch the trailer, you're
Yeah.
gonna say, "I'm not getting all the pieces here."
Hmm.
And this is a movie. It's a psychological thriller. It's magical realism, but it's a movie that you need to pay attention to for sure. And my
Mm.
hope is that people will enjoy and like the film on first watch, but then want to watch it again.
Yeah. So you're having this showing, the VIP showing around Thursday, and then I mean, sorry, around Thursday. I'm sorry, around Thanksgiving, and then do you know what's going to happen with it? Do you know where it's going to wind up?
It's such a weird world right now with COVID,
Mm.
because as someone who's produced films,
Yeah.
I'm very good in person with networking and whatever. So as a director, you think I'm going to make a film. We're going to go on the film festival circuit. I'm going to meet people in person. They're going
Yeah.
to fall in love. We're going to talk. We're going to now. There are still these virtual festivals that are happening, and some in person, but virtual
Mm.
festivals that are happening for the most part. And if you're not already a known quantity, it kind
Mm.
of takes away the, oh, I just bumped into so and so and we had this
Right.
in-person experience. So I'm kind of waiting.
Drink some wine and eat some stuffed
Yeah,
mushrooms, and yeah, all that
yeah,
stuff. Yeah.
and
In
and
the
and
lobby,
fall
in the
and
lobby of some
fall.
Renaissance hotel somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Or in a weird industrial zone in the middle of
Right.
of West Virginia. It really depends. The question, though, I guess the thing that I'm is because I'm not a known quantity. Now that kids can get their vaccinations, I think things are going to open up in the spring pretty massively.
Hmm.
And so right now I'm doing virtual private screenings to raise money for a festival run, hopefully
Mm.
in the spring and summer. That said, I'm also exploring non-traditional distribution just because the game has changed and people.
Hmm.
It's kind of depressing because I very, very specifically made this film thinking it would be shown on a giant screen. It's an incredibly
Hmm.
meticulously designed visual aesthetic. I don't know if you've ever seen like 2001 Space Odyssey on a small screen, but it kind of sucks. So
I'm trying to remember. I know I've seen it on a big screen.
like as a kid growing up, I was like, "What's the big deal about this movie?" What like, I saw it on like my parents' VCR. Then, as a college student, I saw a 35 millimeter print in a large
Mhm.
theater, and I was like, "Oh,
Yeah.
wow, that's what this movie is." And so I'm kind of in this weird place where originally I set out to make a movie for the theater that should be shown very large. And we worked tirelessly. My cinematographer, Fletcher Wolf, she's just incredible. And we worked tirelessly to make a truly cinematic experience. And then the world changed.
Yes.
And we're like, are we going to show this on a big screen? Will it happen? And then during the editing process, everything I was doing, I had to keep in mind that I now need to make this at least palatable for the small screen.
Well, I mean, the small screen
I'll
is
never be
pretty
able
big
to
now.
opt. Yeah, the small screen's pretty big, 60 inches, whatever, for people with big TVs. But I mean, I'm talking about you need to, like,
Yeah, no, I'm with
I'm
you.
at, when you shoot Barry Lyndon,
Yeah.
you want it on a giant wall. Like, we did a whole lot of very, very slow, long shots with slow zooms. I had to cut a lot of those because
Interesting.
I needed
So in your
to
editing
make it
process,
accessible. Yeah.
yeah, you're thinking about what if this goes to streaming? What if this is an HBO thing? What if there's a what strikes me is you were saying all of that about the difficulty of networking, and you're an award-winning sound guy. In other words, you're already a producer. You're already a person with a resume. So that must be so, like, because in other words, you could
As a
actually
sound
contact somebody.
person, yeah,
Yeah,
but as a sound person, people say, "Oh, you're the sound person." What? I don't know you as a director. It's really interesting. Even as an executive producer, for instance, I executive produced a film called Driftwood
hmm
in either 2016 or 2017, and we actually won the grand jury prize at Slam Dance.
hmm
And I said, "Hey, Slam Dance, is this going to help me get in as a director?" And they're like, "Nope."
How interesting. I mean, you would think that look, I'm not trying to argue for you over some brilliant kid from West Virginia, but you would think that having a resume and having some Emmys under your belt would,
Nah,
in
means
theory,
nothing. It means nothing unless you are known for the directorial. And to Slam Dance's credit, they really do have zero nepotism.
yeah.
Because I tried, I was like, "Hey guys, remember me?" And like, "Yeah, we remember you." And I was like, "Are you gonna let my movie in?" And they're like, "Maybe."
Maybe. That's really interesting. That is really wild. And I've really enjoyed hearing you talk about, how different it's gotten for directors, during all of this. I was talking to a producer the other day and she was saying that everything shuts down around now. She was like, nothing sells right now. I'm sure there are exceptions. She goes, January things will open back up. And she goes, especially because during COVID you had all this stuff in development and then and they kind of developed everything that they could develop. And now, like, she was like, so everything's going to chill. And then the spring things will open back up
Boom.
again.
It will be an
I'm going to assume
explosion
that
of
that's true.
content. It will be an
Yeah.
explosion of content, whether or not it's in person or not. Now, I have high hopes that it will be.
hmm
Like I said, but even if not, yeah, that's why I'm now exploring some alternate means of distribution.
Sure.
My little star, it's so interesting. She is really unique and one of a kind, and the rest of the world
You're
kind of
talking about Audrey Grace Marshall,
yeah,
right?
Audrey
Yeah.
Grace Marshall. Yeah, she's absolutely incredible, and she was at 9 years old. She was at 7 years old. I mean, uh, the funny thing is, I was like, "Oh man, this will be great for your career, Audrey, because you're so stellar in this. People are going to see it." Well, here I am, 3 years later, after filming, still now finally releasing it, and in those 3 years, she's been cast in The Flight Attendant as
Sure.
the young lead, like, so the young
Well,
version
she's a
of the
young
lead.
lady, right? I mean, she's
She's
like,
like
she's
yeah,
really.
she's like a teenager now. She's starring in a Paramount Plus show. She was
Mhm.
in Jessica Jones. Like, it's funny at this point. Not only does she not need this film for the career for her career, but like, this this may be kind of like, oh hey, did you know that Audrey Grace Marshall made this film when she was nine
Hey,
years
not
old?
for nothing, but a James Bond movie sat on the shelf for like 4 years, so I think you you'll be okay. But
But
no, nobody has ever lived through anything like this before. Honestly, that so that's I don't know. It's amazing. But okay, Cory Troy, the movie is Esme My Love. It really you should check out the trailer, everybody. I will make sure that goes up when this article goes up. And I really love the texture so far, and I don't know exactly where the story is going, but it's creepy and it had my attention. I was totally leaned forward and listening when my preview ran out, and so that's a good sign. And I wish you all the best with it. I hope the screenings go great.
thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.